The sky over Garath 9 was an angry red, streaked with black clouds of smoke rising from the charred remnants of what used to be thriving cities. The planet, a once pristine world of lush forests and crystalline oceans, now lay in ruins. Vast industrial complexes and military bases were reduced to twisted metal and shattered glass. The ground was scarred with deep craters, the legacy of years of war. Captain Leo Carrick stood on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the valley below. His hand gripped the cold metal of his rifle as he surveyed the battlefield. His eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon where flashes of gunfire lit up the smoky haze. The clash of humanity's galactic forces and the Xari Empire was inevitable. But today, it seemed to have reached its boiling point. "Sir?" A voice crackled through his earpiece, pulling him from his thoughts. Leo turned to face his communications officer, Lieutenant Zara Levis, who was crouched behind a rock. Her face was tense, eyes wide with the kind of fear that came with knowing the battle was slipping out of their hands. The Xari forces had been relentless, and it was clear that the ceasefire, fragile as it had been, was falling apart. "Enemy forces are pushing forward, Captain. Our defenses are failing," Zara reported, her voice steady despite the growing chaos. "We need to retreat." Leo didn't answer immediately. He looked again at the battlefield. His squad had been holding the line for hours. But now, it was clear that the Xari were not just attacking, they were intent on wiping out every last one of them. "We're not retreating," Leo said, his voice a calm contrast to the madness around them. "Hold the position. I'll handle this." He keyed his calm to the rest of the team. "Listen up, everyone. We're not backing down. They want us to run? Fine. Let's make them regret it." He glanced at Zara and nodded. "Cover me." Without waiting for a response, Leo sprinted forward, charging down the cliffside, his boots pounding against the dirt. His soldiers followed his lead, moving with precision, despite the overwhelming enemy presence. The Xari Empire's forces were different from anything they had faced. They were technologically superior, their armor stronger, their weapons deadlier. The soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine, their tactics sharp and relentless. But Leo had something they didn't, the raw determination of a human soldier who had spent years fighting for survival. Leo reached the front lines, his rifle flashing as he picked off enemies one by one. His squad flanked him, and together they formed an impenetrable wall of fire. But it wasn't enough. The Xari were too many. "Retreat!" Leo ordered, recognizing that they couldn't hold their position any longer. But just as they began to fall back, a series of explosions rocked the ground beneath them. A transport ship, the type used to carry high-ranking Xari officials, came crashing down, its tail spinning as it skidded across the battlefield. It was burning, the flames lighting up the dusk like a beacon. Leo's heart skipped a beat when he saw the insignia of the Xari royal family emblazoned on the side. This wasn't just any casualty. This was a critical moment in the war. Without thinking, Leo raced toward the wreckage, his squad following closely behind. "Sir, what the hell are you doing?" Zara shouted as she caught up with him. "I'm saving a life," Leo replied, his voice tense. "Now move!" The wreckage of the transport was a twisted mess of metal and fire. Leo reached the cockpit and immediately saw her. The Xari queen, Vraxa, lay unconscious among the wreckage, her royal armor dented and bloodied. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. His first instinct was to leave her, after all, she was their enemy. But something in her unguarded state, so vulnerable and broken, made Leo pause. He pulled her from the wreckage, ignoring the enemy fire that now rained down around them. Her body was heavy in his arms, and despite the armor, he could feel the blood soaking through. The Queen of the Xari Empire was more than just a symbol of their enemies. She was a leader, a force of nature. Leo had always admired her from a distance, even if she represented everything he fought against. But this wasn't about admiration. It was about saving a life. And Leo had made his choice. "Captain, what are you doing?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts again, this time filled with panic. "We're going to get killed out here." Leo didn't answer. He only focused on getting Vraxa to safety. They couldn't risk leaving her to die. It would mean more than just the end of her life. It would spark an even larger conflict. As long as she was alive, the Xari would need to account for her safety. They found cover behind a large boulder as Leo's squad formed a defensive perimeter. Zara hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking between Leo and the alien queen in his arms. "Sir, you're insane," Zara muttered, but Leo could hear the undertone of grudging respect in her voice. "She's the enemy. And right now," Leo said, "she's a person who needs saving." There was a pause as Zara processed his words. Then, without further comment, she nodded and moved to support the defense. For the next hour, Leo's team worked in a delicate balance of defense and retreat. The Xari forces were closing in, but with the Queen's life at stake, they fought with a sense of desperation that would have been unimaginable under normal circumstances. They weren't just fighting for victory, they were fighting for survival, for peace, for a future beyond this battlefield. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they made it to a makeshift shelter. Leo set Vraxa down gently, her bloodied body still unconscious. Zara quickly began tending to her wounds, and though her face was hard with skepticism, there was no denying the level of care she took in treating the enemy queen. Leo stood apart from the others, looking out into the smoke-filled horizon. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion. He had saved her life, yes. But what would it mean for the future? Would this moment, this act of humanity, be a step toward peace, or the spark for an even greater war? The sound of movement behind him broke his reverie. Zara approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "She's alive," Zara said quietly. "But what now? What do we do with her?" Leo didn't have an answer. He could only look at the Xari queen, a woman whose empire had fought against his people for so long. And yet, for the first time, she seemed human. "We wait," Leo said softly. "We wait and see if this was the right thing to do." And as the moon rose over Garath 9, casting an eerie light over the desolate world, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. The dim light of the shelter cast long shadows across the cracked stone walls, flickering as the fire outside fought to stay alive in the harsh winds. Leo Carrick sat with his back against the cold wall, his legs stretched out in front of him. His mind was far from the temporary comfort of their refuge. The weight of the decision he'd made earlier still lingered in his chest, gnawing at him with each passing minute. He had saved Queen Vraxa, an enemy combatant, from certain death. But was it the right call? Zara Levis crouched by the fire, working to disinfect the Queen's wounds. Despite the delicate care she gave Vraxa, there was no hiding the edge in her voice. "You've lost your mind, Leo. She's the enemy. You can't just ignore that." Leo didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on Vraxa, who lay unconscious on a makeshift cot, her regal armor now stained with dirt and blood. Even in this state, she looked powerful, her features sharp and her expression fierce. A queen born to lead her people, reduced to the helplessness of a mortal being. It wasn't the image of a warrior he'd imagined when he'd first seen her command troops from afar. "I didn't do it for her," Leo finally said, his voice low. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. You know as well as I do that if we left her there, it would have been the start of something worse. There's more at stake here than just a war." Zara's eyes flicked up to him, her brow furrowed with frustration. "You're talking about a war, Leo. A war we're losing. If you think the Xari will let this slide, you're mistaken. You've just given them a reason to escalate. They'll come for us, harder than ever." Leo shook his head. "Not if we make this work." Zara exhaled sharply and turned back to her task. She had no idea what Leo was trying to do. Neither did he, not entirely. But as he watched Vraxa breathe steadily, the feeling gnawing at his guts slowly morphed into something else, something faintly hopeful. Could this be a chance for peace? A chance to show that humanity could rise above the destruction they were all caught in. Vraxa stirred, breaking the momentary silence. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief second, she looked disoriented. When her gaze landed on Leo, her sharp expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "You saved me," she rasped, her voice strained but filled with an edge of disbelief. "You, human, you risked your life." Leo didn't flinch. He'd known the words would come. "I did. And now we need to work together if we're going to survive." Vraxa blinked slowly, as though considering his words carefully. "Work together? You expect me to trust you after you? After I saved your life?" Leo interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. We're stuck here together now. We need each other to get out of this mess." The Queen's eyes narrowed, but there was something in her gaze now, a flicker of something human. She was calculating, weighing her options, but she was no longer the Queen commanding armies from her throne. She was a woman stranded on an enemy planet, dependent on the very soldiers she had been fighting for years. And that made her dangerous. But it also made her vulnerable. "I have no reason to trust you," she finally said, her voice cold again, but not as biting as before. Leo didn't back down. "You have no choice. The Xari Empire is in disarray. And your people, they need you. You're more valuable alive than dead. And for the record, I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking you to survive." Vraxa's sharp gaze swept over him, studying him as though trying to figure out what game he was playing. But Leo didn't look away. He had nothing to hide. The truth was, he wasn't sure of his next move. But he couldn't let the Queen die, not when so much was at stake. Not when their fates, humanity's fate, might depend on the fragile connection they were beginning to form. Zara, who had been silently observing, finally stood up. "If you two are done with the heart-to-heart, we need a plan. The Xari forces will be looking for her, Leo. It's only a matter of time before they find us." Leo nodded, his thoughts shifting to the next immediate threat. They couldn't stay here for long, not with the Xari hunting them. He looked down at the Queen again. She had fallen silent, but he could tell she was listening, processing, planning. "We'll need to find shelter, something more secure. A place where we can figure out our next move. Zara, I want you to start scrounging for supplies. We'll leave as soon as we're ready." Zara hesitated, glancing between Leo and Vraxa. "Are you sure you want her along?" she asked quietly, still skeptical. "She's not exactly on our side." Leo's gaze hardened, but there was no hesitation in his response. "She's the only chance we have right now. You heard what I said. If we're going to survive this, we need to work together." Vraxa's lips curled into something close to a smirk. "You think I need your help? I could have escaped my captors without you. But I didn't. So, I suppose I owe you my life. For now." Leo ignored the sharpness in her tone. There was no room for ego now, not when survival was the only priority. "For now, we're allies. Whether you like it or not." Vraxa didn't respond, her eyes flashing with a mix of disdain and reluctant acknowledgement. She was calculating again, just as he knew she would be. But Leo couldn't afford to dwell on that. The planet was crawling with enemies, and time was running out. As the hours passed, the tension between the two grew palpable. Leo focused on their immediate future, while Vraxa remained stoic, barely acknowledging the humans around her. The uneasy truce between them was strained but necessary. Each of them, it seemed, was playing their own game, but for now, they would have to play by the same rules. By the time they gathered their supplies and prepared to leave, Leo had a single thought echoing in his mind: trust could come later. Survival had to come first. Zara, who had been working efficiently despite her reservations, handed Leo a ration pack. "We move at dawn," she said simply, her voice steady. Leo gave her a nod and turned back to Vraxa. "Ready?" The Queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she met his gaze, the fire in her eyes undimmed by the night or the uncertainty that hung over them both. Finally, she gave a curt nod. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. "But don't think for 1 second that I'm trusting you." Leo didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just turned toward the exit, already knowing what would come next. This was no longer about enemies or alliances. It was about something much more vital: survival. And that, for now, was all they had. The chapter closed as Leo and his team stepped into the darkness, the sound of distant war drums echoing across the battlefield. The cold wind howled across the barren landscape of Garath 9 as Leo Carrick stood at the edge of their makeshift camp. His breath fogged in the air, and his thoughts were a tangle of conflicting emotions. Every decision he had made since the moment he saved Vraxa from the battlefield weighed heavily on him. He had done what he thought was right, but now he was stuck in a dangerous game, a game that neither side was fully aware of yet. As much as he tried to convince himself that it was a step toward peace, Leo couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Behind him, Zara Levis was packing up their gear. Her movements were efficient, yet he could tell she was on edge, still struggling to understand the unexpected alliance he had formed with the Xari Queen. Vraxa was still recovering, sitting silently by the fire, her once imposing presence now subdued. It had only been a few days, but the tension between them felt like a lifetime. Zara broke the silence first. "We can't stay here much longer, Leo. The Xari will be looking for her by now, and if they find us, well, you know the consequences." Leo turned to face her, his expression grim. "We leave at first light," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We need to move further into the mountains. It's the only place the Xari won't think to search immediately." Zara gave him a sharp look. "You really think this will work? Keeping her alive, I mean? Do you think they'll just let this go?" She gestured toward Vraxa, still sitting across the campfire. "You've risked everything, Leo. The entire squad, our mission, everything. For what? A chance at peace?" Leo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the fire, staring into its flames as if seeking answers in the flickering light. He could feel Vraxa's eyes on him, sharp and calculating as always. But this time, there was something different in her gaze, something that made him hesitate. "I don't know, Zara," he said quietly. "I don't know if it will work. But what other choice do we have?" Zara shook her head. "We fight, Leo. We fight for humanity. We don't negotiate with the enemy." Leo met her eyes, a flicker of frustration flashing in his. "Humanity is more than just fighting, Zara. We've been at war for too long. Maybe it's time we tried something else." Before Zara could respond, a voice cut through the conversation, a voice that still held power, despite its current weariness. "You're right," Vraxa said, her voice smooth, yet tinged with a certain edge. "Perhaps it is time for something else. But don't mistake me for someone who believes in your ideals of peace, human. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here because I have no other choice." Leo looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. The Queen had been mostly silent since they had made camp, but now she was speaking with the sharpness he had come to expect. He wasn't sure if it was just strategy or genuine resentment. But for now, he had to take her words at face value. "Then why stay with us?" Leo asked, his voice steady. "You're a queen. You could have escaped, gone back to your people." Vraxa met his gaze, unblinking. "Because you saved my life, human. And I don't forget that. But make no mistake, the Xari will come for me. If I'm alive, they'll stop at nothing to find me. And when they do..." She trailed off, leaving the unsaid threat hanging in the air. Leo understood. Her empire would not tolerate any sign of weakness, and her survival was a symbol of their power. If the Xari discovered that she had been captured by humanity, it would signal the beginning of a new war, one that could destroy everything. "What are you suggesting?" Leo asked, his voice calm but edged with suspicion. "That we just wait for the Xari to catch up with us?" Vraxa leaned forward slightly, her eyes flickering with something akin to calculation. "I suggest you accept my proposal," she said, her voice suddenly cold and firm. "You need me, just as I need you. The Xari are not just going to give up. If you want to survive, we need to form an alliance, a real one. And yes, that includes a marriage." Leo's heart skipped a beat at the mention of marriage. It was absurd. He had saved her life, and now she was proposing this ridiculous idea. But as he looked at her, he realized she wasn't joking. She wasn't the type to make idle threats. This was a power play, and if he was being honest with himself, it was the only way out. Marriage? Leo repeated, his voice low, incredulous. You're serious? Vraxa didn't flinch. I am. It's not just about survival. It's about securing the future of our people. If I can unite the Xari and humanity through you, then both our people can avoid a bloodbath. Leo felt a wave of disbelief crash over him. Was this the only way? Was he truly willing to throw away everything he had fought for, his humanity, his beliefs, just for a chance at peace? He had always been trained to see enemies as enemies. But this wasn't just about war. This was about survival, about breaking the cycle of violence. I can't just marry you, Vraxa, Leo said, his voice rough with frustration. I'm a soldier. I made an oath to humanity. I can't. And I made an oath to my people, Vraxa interrupted, her voice hard. This isn't about your oaths, human. This is about securing peace. I don't expect you to love me, but I expect you to understand what's at stake. Silence fell over the camp as Leo processed her words. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The Xari would never accept defeat. And yet, here he was, being offered an impossible choice. Zara's voice broke through the silence. You're really considering this? She asked, disbelief lacing her tone. You'd betray humanity for this, Queen? Leo stood up, his eyes locked on the horizon. No, he said, his voice firm now. I'm not betraying humanity. I'm trying to save it. He turned back to Vraxa. But understand this, if I do this, it's not because I want to. It's because it's the only way for both of our people to survive. Vraxa nodded, a glimmer of approval in her gaze. Then we have an understanding, human. Leo exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. There was no going back. He had made his choice. The Xari would come. But perhaps, just perhaps, this union, this impossible marriage, could prevent the worst from happening. The fire flickered in the center of the camp, its light casting long shadows over the faces of the unlikely allies. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the path forward would be shaped by their willingness to face the unknown, together. And in that moment, Leo Carrick realized that the war he had been fighting might not be the one that mattered most after all.